welcome to the Consider the Reference podcast. I'm Michael Hardwick. Today we'll run through how NBA players have performed for their new teams in their first games after being traded this week, recap a historical NCAA basketball game, and preview the Super Bowl. So without further ado, let's jump into the NBA. The NBA trade deadline was especially active this season between the Tuesday start of all this madness and the deadline on Thursday. 14 trades occurred between those 3 days, lots of players switching teams, and a couple of them making it to their new teams in time for the recording of this podcast. We had Kyrie Irving making it to the Mavericks for their game on Wednesday, and Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie making it to the Nets in time for their game last night against the Bulls. So Irving, in their game on Wednesday, the Mavericks took on the Clippers. Irving was able to lead Dallas in scoring with 24 and shot 50% from three-point land. And as a result, the Mavericks would triumph over the Clippers 110-104. And then Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie on the Nets as they took on the Bulls. Dinwiddie led the charge for the Nets, scoring 25, leading the team only behind Zach LaVine in terms of entire game scoring. LaVine, I believe, had 38 points. Dinwiddie also added 6 assists and 5 rebounds. And Finney-Smith made his own contributions, scoring 9 points and grabbing 9 boards. And so in their first game without Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, the Nets beat the Bulls 116-105. So the trades are working out so far for the players on their new teams, both of them leading their teams to victory in their first contests. And then a lot of these trades that have happened, they happened after these teams played each other earlier in the week. So the Nets and the Suns making that Kevin Durant trade for Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, and then several first-round picks also going to the Nets. They played each other earlier this week. The Jazz and the Timberwolves, we had Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker being sent from the Jazz all the way to Minnesota, joining the Timberwolves after their game this week. We had Jacob Poeltl and Khem Birch swapping teams, Poeltl going from the Spurs to the Raptors, and Birch going from the Raptors to the Spurs after their game this week. And then the Magic and the Nuggets also took part in a trade, the Magic receiving a pick from Denver after their game. And so with the trade deadline out of the way, we'll move on to This Day in Sports. For this segment, I'll find a game from the past that was either just a close game, or it had some significance, or maybe it just had an interesting box score when I found it and looked at it. So I'd initially planned on finding a game where the NCAA number 1 ranked men's basketball team lost. But then looking back through all of the number 1 losses through the entire NCAA basketball history, I saw that no number 1 team has ever lost on this date, February 10th. So instead I decided to focus on a specific game without the number 1 overall team, this one coming from 20 years ago, February 10th, 2003. This game featured the Carmelo Anthony-led Syracuse Orange and the UConn Huskies, headed by sophomore center Emeka Okafor. The Huskies were in their 3rd game without head coach Jim Calhoun, who had been recovering from a cancer surgery. Both teams were still in the Big East at the time and had entered this game ranked in the AP poll, with Syracuse 17th and UConn 23rd. The Huskies ended up triumphing in this game 75-61. They've received key contributions from the aforementioned Okafor, who ended the contest with 15 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 blocks. Carmelo Anthony had a good game, but it wasn't enough, as he had 29 points and 11 rebounds, just not enough for Syracuse to overcome the Huskies. However, this was just a small bump in the road for the Orange, who would end up winning the national title later that year over Kansas, while UConn was bounced in the Sweet 16 by Texas, who also lost to Syracuse in the Final Four of that year's tournament. And now with as big a news as the NBA trade deadline this week, we all know the big story in sports this week is the Super Bowl. As the Eagles and the Chiefs face off in Glendale, Arizona for Super Bowl 57, at 5:30 on Sunday on Fox. Both teams are the 1 seed from their conference, and both have won a Super Bowl in the last 5 years. The Eagles won Super Bowl 52 against New England, 41-33, and the Chiefs beat the 49ers 31-20 in Super Bowl 54. So a couple of interesting stats that I saw pop up in the last couple weeks since the NFC and AFC championships are the coin toss stats on the last 8 Super Bowls. So the winner of the coin toss has lost the last 8 Super Bowls. This goes back to the Seahawks losing to the Patriots in Super Bowl 49. In each of these games, the coin toss winner has deferred and kicked off to begin the game. So maybe this year's Super Bowl coin toss winner will be bold and elect to receive the kick instead of taking the conventional way out and kicking to start the game. And also in the last 20 Super Bowls, the team wearing the white jersey has won nearly every time. Since the Patriots took down the Panthers in Super Bowl 38 while wearing their dark jerseys, the team wearing dark jerseys have won only 3 times. Interestingly, the Chiefs and the Eagles both wore dark jerseys when they won the Super Bowl. And looking at every Super Bowl, the white jerseys have won 36 of the 56 games. And for this week, the Eagles are wearing green and the Chiefs are wearing white. So the Chiefs certainly hope that these trends continue, while the Eagles want to repeat what they did in Super Bowl 52 against the Patriots and win while wearing dark jerseys. And now for the injury report for each team. Both teams are bringing lengthy injury reports this week, but for different reasons. Of the 13 Eagles players to be limited in practice, only 5 have an official injury designation, while the others are simply being rested. Both Avonte Maddox and Robert Quinn missed practice with foot injuries and would impact the Eagles' defense if they were unable to go this weekend. The injuries on the Chiefs side, however, are much more significant. Most importantly for them, Patrick Mahomes was a full participant in practice, as were top running backs Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon. But KC may be lacking a bit of depth at the receiver position, as Juju Smith-Schuster missed practice with a knee injury, and Kadarius Toney also missed practice with an ankle injury. Toney also has returned punts this year for Kansas City, so they might need a replacement there too, which could make special teams much more problematic for them come Sunday. And they also had safety L'Jarius Sneed suffer a concussion earlier in the playoffs, but he has cleared protocol and will play for Kansas City. And as far as team rankings go, there are several points of interest, team rankings and the team stats. Several interesting things here. So when combining the regular and postseason play of each team, they've scored exactly 547 points, or 546 points actually. The Eagles made a big comeback, scoring 30 points per game here so far in the playoffs. So they've cut down the gap that Kansas City had on them at the end of the regular season. The Eagles were much better team defensively during this season, giving up 1.5 per game less than the Chiefs, and also giving up only 7 points in each playoff game, giving up 7 to the Giants and then to the 49ers in the NFC Championship, while the Chiefs have given up 20 points, first to the Jaguars in the divisional round and then to the Bengals, so giving up 20 points in each of their playoff games so far. The Eagles' turnover margin of +8 was good enough for third in the league this season, while Kansas City's was just -3 and ranked 22nd. Kansas City's pass offense was also number 1 this season, but Philadelphia's wasn't a slouch. They ranked in the top 10, and Philly often finds themselves relying on the run game, ranking 5th in rushing compared to Kansas City's number 20 rank of rushing. So Philadelphia can pass the ball, but oftentimes they don't need to pass the ball. And the one knock against the Eagles so far this postseason is their pathway to get to the game. So the Eagles took on a divisional rival, the Giants, who a lot of people saw as an overachieving team and didn't really expect them to even get to the divisional round, let alone make the NFC Championship. So several people have seen that as just a pushover, easy win to get to the NFC Championship. And then in the NFC Championship, the 49ers came in on a huge winning streak, but then Brock Purdy, their third-string quarterback, got injured his UCL in that game, and was replaced by Josh Johnson, who had led a scoring drive, but then he unfortunately suffered a concussion, and that necessitated San Francisco putting in Brock Purdy, who was already injured and had only thrown 2 passes so far earlier in the game, to finish out the rest of the game, the last quarter and a half. And so I think San Francisco did something like throw only 11 passes for the entire game, and only 2 of those were after Johnson was hurt in the third quarter. So that was an easier win for the Eagles than a lot of people would have expected going into that game. And so this is a true test for the Eagles, and they can really prove to the whole NFL world if they were a legit team this year or not. A lot of people expect them to underperform this weekend against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. But my official prediction, if Philadelphia can take the early lead and establish their run game, they can shorten up the game a little bit, take a few possessions away from Kansas City's explosive offense, then I think the Eagles defense can take care of the rest, and the Eagles will come out on top 27-20. Leave your predictions in the comments for who you think will win this week's Super Bowl. That is all I have for today's podcast. Next week should be an interesting one, as the Daytona 500 is next Sunday, as well as the start of the XFL on Saturday and Sunday. So I'll have coverage of that on next Friday's podcast. Thanks for listening, and have a good day.